Okay, well, it's about time to get started. Rao, are you ready for the technical update?
Yes, I am. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share the link and the documents here.
Hello, everyone. Steve's here.
Hey,
Hey,
Steve.
Steve. So here is the link to the community update, today's community update. Let me share my screen. All right. So we released the 0925 last week, and right now all the mainnet validators are running 0925. And so we're moving on to actually, we're currently testing 0925.1 with about a dozen PRs. We tested it on Sandbox, we're testing it on testnet. And this is the second part of the last finalized state releases. I say second part because in 0925, we basically released some PRs that enabled last finalized state, such as the key value store construct that is used in the other parts like the DAG store and block store to create or help implement the last finalized state. So that in that sense, the 0925.1 is a substantive second part of the last finalized state implementation. There are still a few things that we need to do that will probably go in 0926, but in the interest of keeping releases small, we wanted to get out whatever is available, once it passes through all the testing in the multiple networks. So that's kind of where we are. So the main content in 0925.1, which I said on GitHub, it's July 14th, but with any luck, we'll probably get it out a little bit earlier. The main content is the DAG store, block store, and LMDB improvements. The DAG store is using the key value store construct that was created in 0925. I can look, I guess I'll maybe take a minute to click on this link here to show the items that are in 0925.1. I think you should be seeing a list of items now. Is that what you're seeing? List of closed PRs. Hello?
Yes, I'm seeing it.
Okay. All right. So as you can see here, the improvements to LMDB, I guess this one here, DAG store using the key value store, and the optimization of the block store. These are some of the, and reorganizing the transport layer, commutal, and block store. These are some of the major content pieces, as well as now we include the justification information in the block information. Some of the other things are either bug fixes or improvements, and basically CI improvements, where now we have more of the GitHub process working, because previously we were getting some errors and some artifacts not being created. So we got that fixed. Stanislav fixed that. And the issue templates and things like that. So there is some housekeeping items, and NotZipper put in some improvements to the logs. So those are some of the things that are going into the into 0925.1, which should be out, let's say, within a week to 2 weeks from now. That's the main content of work in the last week. I already said the 0925 is running on the mainnet. This is an observation more than any claim. I guess Gurinder was looking at the block creation times, and he observed that it's now taking on the mainnet 51 seconds between block creations versus what used to be 3.5 minutes earlier. So that's approximately 4x faster, but right now we're not too focused on any specific performance tests, but what we really want to do is kind of keep a tab on, keep our eyes on whether we are getting full thread utilization on the machine for the work that is being done. So that once we get to that, basically what that means is that we have the code at a state where it's linearly scaling. So that's sort of what linearly scaling with the resources that you throw at it. So that's kind of what we're focused on. NotZipper may be running some tests in that arena either end of this week or early next week, and we'll report whatever we can from that at that point in time. You already have the 0925 release notes. All of the rest of the 0925 pieces are just basically a repeat from the last session, but I left them in there for reference since that is the current running version on the mainnet. So we're still focused on completing last finalized state. Once 0925.1 is released, 0926 should close off last finalized state. And in that whole thing, what we're looking at, we're working on the slashing bugs that I talked about earlier. There is a problem in the rewards that are being displayed, and that seems to occur after the slashing, and we're looking at whether it's related to slashing errors or is sort of an independent bug of its own. So there is an initial PR. Will has created an initial PR to fix this. That's being reviewed. He's adding both unit tests as well as running it on the sandbox because for things like this, we need to actually have the whole process of the blockchain up and running for a period of time. Has to be replicated so that we get to a point of, okay, there are rewards and there are problems with reporting the rewards. So he's kind of in that process of running the entire process on the sandbox to see under what conditions these incorrect rewards are being shown and its relationship with the slashing, pre and post slashing. So that's the kind of testing that's being done right now on that. So sometimes the sequence or timing of when we apply rewards could cause a problem with that. So that I think is the main thrust of work that is going on right now. This again, the paragraph about last finalized state, I left it in there as a reference as to what it is for people that are just reading this document so they don't have to dig through the earlier documents. We did get the full $10,000 worth of grant from IBM for their cloud resources.
Monthly.
So we're thankful to them, and even though it's been tough to work through the customer support issues with them, we're motivated to work with them now, and we're moving more servers onto the IBM resources. So at the moment, the sandbox, the testnet, they're both running on IBM servers, and we're moving the monitoring servers over to IBM. And then I already talked about now the new issues that we create. We're not putting them in Jira. We're putting them in GitHub. That's where we are, and you'll see more and more things going on in GitHub. Tech governance, there is a session tomorrow at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific. Jim pointed out that I was amiss to kind of highlight what happened in the tech governance sessions the last time. So one of the recent sessions, one of the substantive discussions was about sharding, how coordination across multiple shards works. Is it a tree? Is it a mesh? And can any shard talk to any shard without, and if they wanted to do that, what tokens, token support do they need to have? Because if you have 2 different shards with 2 different tokens and you want to talk to any shard, you need the token of that shard if you're thinking of it as a mesh. But Greg clarified subsequently in a private conversation, but I think tomorrow actually, I have not told this to Greg yet, but tomorrow may be a good time for Greg to participate in the tech governance call, because the commitment we said is that rather than take up his time every tech governance call, because sometimes they are, we wanted to concentrate or focus his time on specific issues and bring them up to his attention so that he can address them maybe once every 3 weeks or once every 4 weeks or something like that. So tomorrow may be a good time because we have had enough conversations so far and enough issues or items identified for Greg to participate in a session productively. So that's the tech governance summary. Go ahead, Greg, you had a question.
No, I was just saying, sounds good.
Yeah. So Dan Conley made some progress on the Zulip chat. He demonstrated the, what I'm calling here the ability to catch and chain. But basically, he's able to read the Zulip messages using the PostgreSQL listen and then put them on the chain. That's been done. The piece that needs to be done is chain back to PostgreSQL so that the Zulip chat user interface can be used to read the messages. That piece, I think at this point, we don't have any volunteers yet, but that's something that's being worked on or needs to be worked on. And Dan now has access to Gurinder set up for Dan a server that per Dan's specs that he can use as a dev server for the RChat effort. Possibly, I think it should allow multiple people to log in and test the pieces as they're developed on there. So that's the other progress in the RChat arena. Rest of the stuff here, again, the backlog, I just left it there as a reference, has not changed much. I guess the only thing here that I'll probably add is actually it's already in here as a third item about refactoring Runtime Manager. So we're kind of beginning to look at the refactoring of the Runtime Manager as a precursor to enabling these other things that we have here, specifically block merging. And the other piece that NetZipper is working on or looking into is putting a part of the configuration on the chain itself with like a multi-sig ability to multi-sig, basically a multi-sig control to be able to modify that. So right now, for example, things like epoch length are hard-coded in the code, meaning once you start the network, you cannot do anything with that. So we're putting some of those parameters into the chain and creating a contract that can actually modify those as we go forward. So we'll talk more about that as we have more to say about what we're doing there and how we're doing that. So that, I think, is the tech update. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? All right, over to you, Greg.
Thanks very much for the update, Rao. That was great. I'm really looking forward to seeing 0926 out the door. That'll be fantastic. And I'm sure many people are as well. The next segment in the call is our community and review, which Daryl will be walking us through. Daryl, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so here's the second installment of the Community Week in Review for Thursday, the 25th to Wednesday, the 1st today. Happy Canada Day. I'm possibly the only Canadian here, but today is our 4th of July. So anyways, last Thursday, 25th at 1400 UTC was the tech governance meeting. The committee, as an ad hoc compensation committee, modified and then voted to send governance compensation. Then at 1600 UTC was the governance committee meeting. The committee discussed prioritization of other committees to be formed as per the bylaws, whether committee chairs are paid positions. They discussed nominations committee for October voting and the current state of the communications working group. At 1800 UTC on the last Thursday, was the DApp Development Working Group meeting. Consideration of MetaMask RChain login and message signing for Zulip, and building Dan Connolly's voting web UI got started. On Friday, the 26th, was the Climate and Coordination meeting. Greg and Steve Ross Talbot began with a conversation about smart contracts, which was followed by a group discussion on the Arctic reaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit, including an exploration of media, coordination, and the value of whales. On Saturday, the 27th, was the RChat call. Dan showed the OCAPS-based voting and showed where he was stuck with Zulip. They assigned Jim and Dan pair programming to get unstuck. Greg acknowledged that other priorities preempted his hope to do a restore from RChain to Zulip. And the initial setup of Zulip multi-user deployment with RChain Mirror was completed by Dan and Jim following the meeting. On Monday, the 29th, was the Casper stand-up meeting at 1400 UTC. They explained why they changed the name from Ladle to operational semantics in logical form. They also spent some time talking about the collection types. And apologies, I haven't had a chance to upload that to YouTube. So for all you Casper stand-up fanboys and girls, I hopefully will have that loaded up today. At 5 p.m. UTC, the blockchain art call happened last Monday. Discussion was around reverse game theory, quadratic voting, radical markets, object capabilities, whether or not it lends itself to fair and secure elections, given the liquidity of the voting credits. So a lot of discussion around how voting can work. Tuesday, the 30th, RChain education meeting involved following Greg's lectures, monadic design patterns for the web, introduction to monads, as well as Monday's Casper sessions, introduction to monoids, syntax, instances, use cases, and examples like numbers and strings, or parametric, which looks like monads. In the next session, we will extend monoid with additional operations and implement simple Rolang in Scala in tagless final style. I understood very little of what I just read there. Let's see. And then as well on Tuesday at 1700 UTC was the Communications Working Group. I gave an update on what we've been working on with the new blog site, and it will hopefully be live during this week. The new weekly newsletter has yet to be sent. We're still working through the process and the content and the structure. We discussed blog user experience and architecture. We created the idea of creating a blog submission funnel so we can call out to the community to potentially submit blog entries. A proposed layperson Q&A series for potential upcoming RCasts, and coordinating communications messaging with the China team. And today at Jim's member hangout, longtime member Evan Basson joined us, gave us an update on what he's been up to. There was discussion around using MetaMask with Rev and voting process. And that leads us up to right now. All right, I'll pass it back to Greg.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you. That was great. Maybe we should just check in and see how the community and review is going for people. Is this also a useful segment? Are people finding this useful to kind of get clued in on more of the activity that's going on and not just the technical activity?
Well, it's my first time, and I thought it was very good.
Oh, excellent. Great. Glad to hear it. Anyone else? Is this useful for folks?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, there was also a board meeting yesterday. We should probably add that in as well.
Well, that's what I was going to do, yeah.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah. So there was a lot of discussion that will have to move to the closed door session. And then the board agreed to make sure that the dev team was recognized. So which is long overdue. So the dev team has been recognized, and this is of course not the end of all the recognition that the co-op needs for all of the effort from many quarters. But we can only do so much at any given time. But we really appreciate the hard work. Without this dev team, without this efforts of people who work for many months without pay, we would not have been able to complete all of the cost accounting. We would not have been able to complete or close out many critical bugs. We wouldn't have had a functioning API for the exchanges. The list goes on and on and on. You know, the refactoring of the repository in terms of the release cycle, the operations, you know, the work necessary to move the networks over to different clouds such as IBM. The list is just enormous. So it was high time that the cooperative recognized the efforts of folks who were willing to stick it out even when things were tough. So really appreciate all of their hard work. Let's see. I think that's it for the board discussion. So any questions about any of that?
Yeah, those draft minutes are posted as well if anyone wants to see.
Okay. Moving on. The thing that's really important, because we've had only the tiniest bit of activity. Everyone on this call who wants to be able to participate in voting with in the AGM needs to submit a rev address to the to mim-gov.rchain.coop. So let me, if you need help creating a rev address, if you want to keep that separate from other rev addresses that you use. We can provide you a tool that will help you create a rev address. So really, let us know if you need any help. We don't want anyone to be disenfranchised. So you're getting plenty of warning. It's the beginning of July, and the AGM meeting is third week in October. So you're getting plenty of warning. There's no excuse not to get the rev address in. If you get your rev address in by July 31st, you'll get 100 rev for your efforts. If you don't get your rev address in before the second week in October, you won't be able to participate in the voting process. So this is really, really important. This is very serious. Please get your rev address to the co-op. The co-op can't issue a rev address because then the co-op knows the private key, and we don't want to know the private key. We want you to be in charge of your private key. I do hope that this is understood. Any questions about this?
I can add, I'd like to get out the notice of the October 24th annual meeting. I'd like to send that out this week, and we can include some recommendations for where you can go and generate a rev address using some friendly GUI. Because I believe we have about 5 wallets now that that support rev and rev address generation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might also be worth clarifying that for people that don't get the rev address to us by July 31st, but do that between, say, August 1st and October 15th. Is that the deadline?
Yeah, that's the deadline, yeah.
And so during that time, that they will basically only get the dust needed to vote, not the $100. That's the difference.
100 rev, not $100.
And how should
I'm
they
sorry,
submit,
100.
how
Yes.
should they submit their address?
Yeah.
To mem-gov@rchain.coop. They email it from the email they used to register with the co-op.
Right.
And I put the email in the chat.
Any questions from anyone? Because so far, no one has taken us up on this. This is absolutely essential if you are going to participate in the co-op.
I've just taken you up on it. I've just sent mine.
Awesome.
Because you guilt tripped me. You guilt tripped me, so it worked.
Okay. So that's really about it in terms of the updates. So are there any questions, comments from the community, anything that needs to be addressed now?
Well, one sort of thing that might be of interest to the community, I don't know if it's still a hot topic, or yeah, I mean, it's a background topic really, which is the SQL Rolang converter.
Mm.
Is that still a hot topic for you, Greg?
Well, I mean, so there are two things. One is, of course, just focusing on the RChat scope. So with the RChat scope, the next thing that we need to do is to go from the chain back to SQL. So Dan knows how to do that. This is basically waiting for some additional resources, and I've been saddled with a bunch of other things that I have to attend to, and have not been able to be as responsive on that. Steve and I are trying to play tag team on that. So we'll see what's can happen. But if there are any folks out there who want to help out with this is a relatively straightforward thing to do, and we can get it done quickly if there are resources to tag team on this. The broader scope, which is sort of the surface area of SQL that is covered by an ORM, we should definitely make that be something that we offer as a capability, because it is a very straightforward mapping, and would greatly expand the scope of RChain as a backend.
And just to say that if anyone's interested as well, that there is an open source, more or less fully complete Postgres SQL implementation using Antler that's out there on GitHub. So if you search for it, you will find it.
Awesome. That's really cool. Very cool. All right. Any other questions or comments from the community about anything that's burning?
I've got a question. Another question.
Sure.
I was having a chat with a guy today. His name's Duncan Johnson Watt, and he's part of a blockchain thing up in Scotland. And he's the first chair of some DAML related activity. DAML being a language for smart contracting agents. And he's quite interested in looking at RChain, just generally because he thinks it's a leap forward in technological thinking, which is very kind of him to say. So I'm curious to know if anyone's had a look at, I mean, this might be, Dan, right up Dan Connolly's street, because Dan may have been involved in DAML, I don't know. But I'm also interested in looking, I like languages, so for me it's kind of like a hobby. I'm interested also in looking at a DAML Rolang tie. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that. Or
Sure.
anyone else.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. What's the uptake for DAML these days?
I don't know. I do know, however, that ISDA's, as in the International Swaps and Derivatives Association, the guys behind derivatives, their base core model is constructed in DAML. So if you think of a derivative is really, it's a long-term contract that fires up on the 21st of the third month of every quarter, and margin calls are made based on the contract. And ISDA have always been, they've been exploring how to codify that as smart contracts. And so they started looking at DAML. They have done experimentation with Ethereum, but found that it just wouldn't scale for them. What a surprise. They're still very interested in us. And I know Mark Gatakos, who was the architect of a lot of the FPML stuff, he is actually a member of the co-op.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting.
So I know the uptake's high in financial services for that reason. And it turns out that's really quite important for what are called smart legal opinions. So, and I was talking to, again, Duncan Johnson Watt and a company called D2LT that specialize in legal opinion. And the reason legal opinion is important is if you imagine having a blockchain that scales, so now we can kind of imagine that, maybe we didn't quite imagine it 2 years ago, but we certainly can imagine it now. If you imagine that the scaling issue goes away, and if you imagine that the bad typing issues also pretty much go away, maybe not immediately, but over time, when two enterprises contract with each other to do something, the reason they don't like using a blockchain that's public today is because in the event of a default by one party against the other, there's no what's called closeout netting agreement that says how in liquidation the other party, you know, gives money to the one that was holding the baby, as it were. And there's shed loads of contracts. All derivative contracts have these, and they're jurisdictional between the counterparties. And the legal opinion is required to determine the enforceability of it. And if you can enforce it, either side, what it means is that the bank doesn't have to hold as much capital in reserve. So it has a massive impact on the capital that you can use as a bank to invest. Right, so so it turns out, I think, pretty sure now, that for enterprises to use blockchain in this way, between very large enterprises potentially, they need to have legal opinion. And legal opinion you can actually generate using some AI, ML, NLP type techniques. There's a way of generating them, but they're reliant on a structure underneath. And that's what the DAML stuff in FPML in ISDA gives them. So it could well be that through this rather circuitous route, that it would be possible to have smart legal opinions generated by some utility against contracts placed on RChain, encoded potentially in Rolang, coming out again as DAML, for smart legal opinions to be generated and also put on the blockchain to support the contracts. So it removes, for me, the final objection that enterprises have at a large level of using a public blockchain.
Yeah, no, this is a very natural application of blockchain. Very compelling, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's what will drive initial DAML adoption.
Well, DAML to Rolang
it's got to be.
Is yes, relatively straightforward. DAML, of course, is not concurrent, as near as I can tell.
I couldn't find any concurrency constructs in there.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So it would be easy to go from DAML to Rolang.
Much harder to
it
go.
Would be a very boring subset the other way.
Yeah, that's correct. That's exactly right. Yeah. Cool. No, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I looked at the DAML site, and it appears that it's more supported by Hyperledger folks than anybody else.
Yes.
Although there is some VMware and Amazon support mentioned on the site.
Yeah, and I think that Duncan is also on the Hyperledger committee, whatever it is that manages Hyperledger. So it's not really a surprise because they're focused primarily on enterprise.
Yeah.
But they do so by sacrificing trust.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
And I saw 3 articles today. I was doing some investigation around it. 3 articles today alone that talk about the end of private blockchains in favor of public blockchains.
Interesting.
It was.
Well, I still believe that the right solution is one that has a spectrum, right? So you shard it up. You let communities build, a shard that meets their needs, and then you piece the shards together. And the shards become more and more valuable the more they're connected to other shards. And so what's public and what's private, Facebook is not really public, right? Facebook is really a private concern, although lots and lots of people use it. And so what's public and what's private is an intriguing thing. Red Square or Tiananmen Square or Times Square, those are not really public, right? Someone from the Czech Republic cannot have access to Times Square unfettered without passing through U.S. customs. So the notion of public is actually must come with a notion of scope, and this is something that I believe that our sharding technology addresses. What is the scope of your notion of public?
I would just add also, though, I mean, everything sounds great. It is overcoming a lot of barriers, what was just discussed, but am I missing the privacy component of the information being exchanged on chain? Because I think that would definitely be a remaining barrier as well to any type of institutional adoption of public chains.
Yeah, so I agree, and one of the things, so this is why the sharding solution is great, because it slots in. As long as you don't tell anybody about the IP addresses associated with your shard, it's private to you, right? So it's sharding completely solves a private chain solution. If you then want to connect your shard to something that is more public and you are concerned about the information on chain, then you have to worry about encryption and other solutions. I still maintain that, you know, a flat namespace, no matter how large, is not a good namespace. So, you know, if you're using one of the SHA namespaces, as large as they are, they're still algorithmically generated. And my argument is that it's much, much, much harder to crack a URL, right? Because you don't know how long that URL could be, right? The challenge I like to give is, I'm thinking of a URL, you have a week to guess it, and you can use whatever resources at your disposal, you know, apart from holding a gun to my head.
I guess my only point would be something along the lines of what Berkshire Hathaway had, like a 10 and 15-year swap agreements with Goldman. The only reason you know that is Berkshire is a public company and they disclose this. But there's many contracts like that that are done where, you know, who the counterparties are or how much aggregate risk an entity has is not something that is acceptable to be public. And in that case, I don't know if simply not knowing the address of where to find that information.
I think you wrap that up in the same concept of identity. So if you have identity that's expressed as a smart contract in which you control the information about you, now you apply that to a corporate, that's how I would do it.
But you're saying that if you weren't able to tie the identity, that would be sufficient in shielding, you know, I guess in the financial markets.
It's a GDPR thing. Think of it like that. Imagine if GDPR on your doorstep also had the ability for you to put all your data in a bubble, and for you to open up little ports on that bubble based on arbitrary logic that you choose. So there might be some information you're not prepared to part with about you that you require people to pay for. Equally, you might give information for free, but only on application.
So I guess I would just say it this way. I definitely want to think about it more. It's not that I'm disagreeing in principle. I'm speaking from a perspective of kind of knowing how the mindset of people on the corporate side and finance think. And, you know, something, who knows if it'll work, but something such as what Tezos is doing with zero knowledge proofs on the main chain, not just for scalability, but for privacy of transaction. Something like that may be the best that I've heard in the blockchain space to address this, outside of having side chains and things of that nature that are basically away from the public chain. Because just having that information out there, it's just not going to get through the risk committees and everything else at these large financial institutions. And I also have the personal opinion that as revenue and margin get eaten away, as basically a lot of these institutions disrupt themselves internally, so as not to get disrupted from the outside, that data, ultimately, they have to find ways to monetize that data to stay a going concern. And therefore, I think they'll become much more protective of their data. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, basically,
I'd love to explore your 2 cents further, but not here.
Okay.
So
I'm on Discord. We can definitely discuss.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting conversation for sure. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a requirement. The multi-party privacy on a need-to-know basis is a common requirement across a whole bunch of contexts. So it's not resolved by either the public or the shard level, but there is a level in between that's or that cuts across. That's a multi-party privacy on a need-to-know basis. I think that needs to be resolved.
The fun never ends.
was that you speaking before, Jeremy?
Just a second ago, yes.
Oh, good.
Not
Okay.
the last person.
Okay.
All right, good people. Unless there's anything else, we can yield back the time to the community. I'm sure I will see some of you at the tech governance call and some of you at the Friday Q&A.
All right, thank you. See
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.